Okay, and we are live. Wonderful. I will give it a few seconds for people to kind of arrive, turn their volume up, and I will begin the show soon. Just give it a few seconds. And I know people can't hear me, but just on the side note, I would like to wish Ramadan Mubarak to people that have started their fasts today. And to the people starting it tomorrow, I hope you have a great Ramadan and this month becomes spiritually rewarding and engaging for you. Also, the beginning of Lent, I think, and a happy new year to the people of China as well. But yeah, I will start here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gloves Off for a discussion with Jeremy Corbyn on the Mandleson affair and what it reveals about the Labour Party, about the government, and about British politics more broadly. My name's Ismail Uddin. I'm a university student and I'm an independent councillor based in Bradford. I'm also a candidate for the Your Party elections in Yorkshire, standing as part of Jeremy's team. And that matters because tonight we just don't want to talk about how broken our politics are, but how we can fix it. As we'll talk later on, a key way you can help us right now, if you're a member of your party, is by voting for the many candidates in the executive elections. So tonight's call will last approximately an hour. I will start with some questions for Jeremy, and then we'll bring in my fellow independent councillor and candidate with the many, former Labour MP Laura Smith. We'll start by discussing the latest fallout from the Epstein files, including their revelations about Peter Mandelson here in Britain. We'll then bring in Laura for a discussion about British politics and the corruption that hides beneath the surface. Before rounding off our chat, finally, we'll go through some questions submitted by people, including you. But first, some context. The Epstein files revelations continue to shock and horrify people all over the world, revealing as they do a corrupt international network of paedophilia and sex trafficking. At home, the depravity of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been exposed. More recently, we saw revelations of the depth of a relationship between Epstein and Peter Mandelson, the twice disgraced peer made ambassador to the United States. We've seen the police open an investigation into Mandelson and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, forced to resign for his role in the scandal. And we've seen links between Mandelson, his lobbying firm, and the corporation Palantir, which has been awarded hundreds of millions of pounds in government contracts. So, on to the bit that you've been waiting for. Jeremy Corbyn inspired us recently with his Syrian takedown of Mandelson and Starmer in the House of Commons. That's just one of the reasons why the many, if we win a majority on the Your Party Central Executive Committee, elects Jeremy Corbyn as parliamentary leader of your party. So give it up for Corbyn and welcome.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you all here, and happy Ramadan for everybody. Ramadan Mubarak for all those Muslims that are celebrating, and whether it's today or tomorrow, hope it goes well. And I'm looking forward to lots of iftar suppers that we're doing locally and other ones that I'm going to. So thanks ever so much, everybody, for being on the call. And yesterday, to get to the eve of Lent, I was at a Shrove Tuesday event at one of our churches making pancakes, which was lovely. Well, they were making pancakes, I was eating them. And so it's been a fantastic experience the last few weeks, looking at the way in which British politics has been so diminished by the Mandleson revelations. But in a sense, it had always been on its way. Mandelson and his malevolent influence on the Labour Party and on politics in general has been exposed through the Epstein files. And the idea that the Prime Minister didn't know what was going on is something to me that is quite shocking. I cannot believe that he wasn't advised by the Foreign Office when they were giving him background information on a potential ambassador to Washington. And then in Washington, as ambassador, he and Starmer went to the offices of Palantir, who had already been granted priority access to our health service contracts by a company owned by Peter Mandelson. After a parliamentary debate, the Independent Alliance group of MPs supported the official opposition demand, which was for the issue to be investigated and that Downing Street have to release all information surrounding Mandleson and the Epstein files. And eventually, rather begrudgingly, the government then added an amendment to say it should go to the Security and Intelligence Committee. I'm not very happy about that. I'd rather it went to an open public inquiry and said so. But that is a quite significant start, because it will expose a whole lot of things about the way in which our public services have been thrown open to market economics and to companies like Palantir, who are directly involved in the military activities in Gaza and the West Bank, and now getting hold of our NHS information. I think we've got to just step up and ramp up the campaign to get Palantir out of our NHS and indeed out of all of our public services. And so that is a big job for our party when fully established, which is only now a week or so away. When the elections are over, we've got a CEC. We can then formally and properly establish branches and everything else, and we can then be out there doing that campaigning, which I'm sure many are already doing in their own communities on Palantir. So it is about the kind of politics that we have, but it's also about the way in which our society is run, the way in which our public services are run. Do you look upon public services as an opportunity for other people to make money out of them, which is what the coalition government did with the Health and Social Care Act? Or do you look upon public services as a service? And so I want us to be campaigning for a decent national care service, which gives people access to care when they need it on the basis of their need rather than on the profit of others. And that would take away the fear that many families have of one of their members needing social care, inadequate service provided by local authorities and the NHS. Therefore, somebody has to give up their work in order to care for somebody that needs it. Not right. And so we need to have that inclusive society. It's up to us to provide that alternative. And then you move on to issues like the public ownership of our major services: mail, rail, water, energy. The list is fairly easy to construct. Take water, for an example. 73 billions taken out of the water industry since privatization. That's why we're having polluted rivers, polluted seas, destruction of chalk streams, and an incredible level of waste of good quality water by leaks, because they haven't maintained the pipe network properly, enough to fill Loch Ness every year. And so we campaign not just for public ownership, but for democratic public ownership, where the workers are involved, where the local communities involved, local businesses involved, local people involved. That would make it impossible for them to re-privatize in the future, because it would be our water. So instead of the Environment Agency having to pick up the pieces of the foul conditions left behind by privatized water, instead it would be a publicly owned water companies or organizations working with the Environment Agency to improve sustainability and environment for all. There's so much we have to do, and so much more I could say, but I'll just finish with this, because we need to have questions and we need to have discussion. The government is about to announce, apparently, yet another increase in arms and defense expenditure. Last year, the world spent $2.4 trillion on arms. When the figures come out for the current figures, they'll be well over 3 trillion. And none of those weapons have made the world safer or more peaceful. And indeed, it's sparking off a massive arms race between essentially the three biggest arms expenditure organizations, which are NATO, Russia, and China. We are obviously part of the NATO arms expenditure. I think we have to be a voice for peace and a voice for disarmament and a voice for getting rid of nuclear weapons. And I'm very keen to achieve that. And I want our party to be able to do that by campaigning for peace in Ukraine, by a ceasefire, and by negotiation. I don't support what Russia's done. I want to see peace. I want to see an end to the conflict and the fighting. I want to see an end to the occupation of Palestine and the way in which Israel is now not just occupying Gaza, but also fundamentally taking over the whole of the West Bank, and with the far right, that's even to the further right than Netanyahu, wanting to expel all Palestinians from there. Britain is complicit in the genocide through the supply of weapons, and the performance on the international stage has been abysmal and appalling. We can change that, and we can do that by our campaigning alongside Palestine Solidarity and all the other organizations, and recognize that the fight back against the loss of civil liberties by Palestine Action and many others is having an effect of turning debate around. We've got to be part of that turning debate around. We need to be, as a party, a creative space by community organizing, a creative space by mobilizing communities, a creative space that strengthens community feeling and identity, where we fight back against hospital closures and school closures, but we also campaign for something better, campaign for a national care service, campaign for the way in which our communities can be stronger through an education service that's more relevant to the needs of the entire community, and taking the commodification, the marketization of education out of the equation. There's so much we can achieve. We can become that important force in political policy development. How do we do that? By establishing ourselves. How do we do that? By working with existing independent groups. I was in Newham on Sunday, really impressive operation they've got going there. Newham Independents, very strong, fighting very hard in their community, but also in the council elections that are coming up. And there's many more all around the country. So we need to work with people to develop the identity of your party and the inclusive space that we are going to be. And when the government says they're reviewing the cost, that's the language they use, the cost of DWP benefits to people with disabilities, I say this: the people that should be reviewing it are those with disabilities and in receipt of DWP benefits, who know how difficult life is and how hard it is to get those benefits. So instead of a civil service ministerial-led review designed to cut expenditure, I want the first thing for us to do is set up a commission made up of our members who are in receipt of PIP to review the situation and come up with their policy proposals, which hopefully we would then accept and adopt as a party, and we can then take that forward as one of our key campaigning ideas. We cannot be an inward-looking, narrow organization that only debates with ourselves. We've got to be out there campaigning in communities all the time, and our meetings once a month have got to be very open to local communities. Your party can be the voice of communities. Your party can be part of communities. If we allow it to become solely inward-looking and debating, it will achieve very little. I'll stop there because I could go on far too long.
Honestly, Jeremy, if I can give you the entire day, I would, but I'm going to go ahead with the questions that people have submitted, and I'll go through it one by one. So first of all, great to have you. I think the first question is, you were in the Labour Party a long time ago. Well, for a long time, actually. What was your experience of Mandleson like?
Well, I first came across Mandleson in the 1980s when he appeared. I think he worked for the BBC at the time, and then Neil Kinnock recruited him to deal with media stuff in the Parliamentary Labour Party. And he then appeared, and he was then shown off to the National Executive by Neil Kinnock. Neil Kinnock at that time was going through what he called Aims and Values period, which was actually a precursor for New Labour. It was essentially ditching a lot of the stuff of the 1983 manifesto and moving on post-miners' strike to something very different, which ended up being the position of New Labour. So Mandleson appeared. Tony Benn told me he had met Mandleson at the NEC, didn't like him, didn't trust him. And I then met Mandleson in Parliament, and I felt exactly the same. Mandelson's whole purpose was to promote New Labour. Now, he did that to some extent with Kinnock, there was a whole move towards New Labour. And then after John Smith was elected, Mandleson was not so obvious for that sadly quite short year that John Smith was leader. Then shortly after John died, literally that day, Mandleson was already wandering around Parliament telling MPs that Blair was the choice. And then, well, you know what happened. Blair was then eventually elected leader. And the first thing Blair did was went off to Australia to be interviewed by the Murdoch Empire to decide whether he was fit to be the British Prime Minister or not. That was organised by Mandleson. Mandelson's whole point and purpose was to change Labour into a market-oriented, pro-business party and take Labour away from its roots. And so we saw all that going on under New Labour. As you know, when I became leader in 2015, I was advised by the Parliamentary Labour Party that the one thing I had to do was immediately recruit Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson to run the media operation of the party. So I said, absolutely no way are either of them having anywhere near the party whilst I'm leader of it. I won't have them anywhere near the place because I remember Iraq, I remember New Labour, I remember ID cards and so much else, and 90-day detention and university tuition fees and so on under those people. I'll have nothing to do with them. So my experience of Mandleson was that he was manipulatively malevolent towards the traditions and experience of the Labour Party, and the Epstein files demonstrate it all. And when he then runs a company that gets the Prime Minister to go and meet the HQ of Palantir, and Palantir then end up directly involved in our NHS, I'm beyond suspicious. So let's see what this inquiry brings out. But I'm not done yet. I think if this select committee inquiry doesn't come up with anything, then we have to go back demanding it. And through the Peace and Justice Project, we did our own inquiry into Gaza. I think we as a party have got to be prepared to work with people that are doing independent inquiries. We've got to blow open the cozy relationship between big business, lobbying, the media, and some MPs in Parliament and some government ministers. Democracy requires it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that response. We're going to go on to our second question, Jeremy. And the second question is what do you think it says about Starmer that he appointed Mandelson ambassador, despite knowing that Mandelson maintained contact with Epstein after his conviction for child sex offences? And what does that say about what's happened to the Labour Party?
Well, good question. Thank you. First of all, I cannot believe that Starmer as Prime Minister was not advised by the Foreign Office of all of the background they had on Mandleson. I just simply cannot believe he was not told that. Two reasons. One is the Foreign Office never wanted a political appointment anyway to Washington. They never do want political appointments. They'd much prefer a career diplomat was appointed. They have a whole career system of diplomats. Now, that is a question we might want to look into, but nevertheless, they didn't want it. Secondly, they are very, very thorough in everything that they do. They would have told him chapter and verse the whole of the story. Epstein's original conviction was in 2008. That is 16 years ago. That was a long time ago, 18 years ago, rather, long time ago. And that was known. Mandleson had a clearly very close relationship with Epstein, these pictures on the yachts and the island and the hotels and all the rest of it with Epstein, and this sort of glamorous web created around Epstein and the money and the arrogance. They thought they could do what they like. So the alarm bells ought to have been ringing from the very beginning. Also, just remember that even Tony Blair had to sack Mandleson twice from government, and then Starmer still appointed him. The only thing I can think of is Starmer was obsessed with appointing him. Starmer felt that he owed Mandleson something because Mandleson supported his and advised, apparently, quietly, on his tactics to become leader of the Labour Party and ultimately Prime Minister. And that didn't come out so much until much later on. But there's a lot of analyses now being done. And I think we have to absolutely say to Starmer, you knew and you were told and you were fully aware, yet you still went ahead. Surely that alone is enough for a reason to go.
Yep, thank you so much again for that response. And I think you've already kind of touched on this, but there's another part to this story, and that's the corporation Palantir. its links to Mandleson, and its role in the NHS. So could you unpack that a bit more for us and the campaigning that you've been doing here?
Yeah, Palantir are obviously a very big and very powerful company. They are sort of at the cutting edge of high tech and the use of high tech in military and civilian purposes, and the use of data in pharmaceutical research, and the use of data, people's data, in military activities as well. So Palantir are deeply involved in the IDF and what it's doing in Gaza, where they have an incredible level of knowledge of every person in Gaza, and that's been used to guide the bombardment and the killing of people in Gaza. And likewise, they're involved with ICE in the United States, where they are allegedly identifying people who, in their views, need to be questioned. And then we see the brutality of what ICE do. They were then given preferred status to come into our NHS on the recommendation of a company that was doing lobbying on their behalf that was owned by Peter Mandelson. Now, again, the inquiry needs to unpick the dates and times that Mandleson owned that particular company, his relationship with them, his financial relationship with them, and what was actually said to the Prime Minister at that fateful meeting in Washington when he went to the offices of Palantir with Peter Mandelson. So Palantir want to get hold of our NHS data, and the Department of Health are trying to persuade each local health authority that they have got to take on Palantir. In my own case, I've had meetings with my own local hospital, a very long meeting. We went through our concerns about Palantir with them and said we didn't want them in there. I suspect the same has been done in many other hospitals around the country. And to be fair, my hospital was interested in what I had to say, interested in what the campaigners who came with me to the meeting had to say. They also explained the sort of pressure they were under from the Department of Health. And so what we have is the Department of Health, because we no longer have NHS England. That was abolished on Starmer's personal intervention. So it's now political decisions by the Department of Health solely decide on major health issues, such as bringing in Palantir. And so I think we've got to keep up the pressure on it. Now, in some ways, the Epstein files and Mandleson help us in this campaign because people have now heard of Palantir. And because of the Epstein files, they have suffered enormous reputational damage. So my advice to anyone listening to this call is join in your local campaign to try and get your local hospital and NHS authorities to refuse to have anything to do with Palantir. And obviously we'll be doing exactly the same thing with national petitions, demands and so on in Parliament. I think we can win this one.
That is very fascinating. Thanks so much, Jeremy. I think in Bradford as well, we are almost kickstarting our campaign to ensure that Palantir is nowhere near our local hospitals and trusts. Now, I want to bring in my fellow candidate, Laura Spiff now. Laura is a former Labour MP for Crewe and Nantwich between 2017 and 2019, a former teacher and an active trade unionist. So Laura is standing with me for the Your Party collective leadership as part of the many, myself in Yorkshire and Humber, and Laura in the public office holder section with Jeremy. So, Laura, welcome. Laura, you were a teacher. Hello. You were a teacher and an education campaigner before becoming an MP. You were elected in Crewe and Nantwich in 2017 and entered the arcane world of Parliament. So what was that experience like for you?
Oh, wow. First of all, can I just say solidarity with everybody who is experiencing half term with this atrocious weather. It is not fun and you have my full sympathy. Entering Parliament, wow. So the first thing is a bit of context, because when I stood for Parliament, that was in the general election that was called by Theresa May. If you can cast your minds back to 2017, that general election was called just with the absolute arrogance of wanting to destroy Jeremy and get rid of that period of time of a left-wing socialist movement building and forming within the UK. And the idea was that there would be this huge loss, and Jeremy would have to go away back to the backbenches, and everything, the status quo could come back, and everyone could get on with business as normal. And it didn't quite happen like that, and it was marvelous. So for me personally, I was a primary school teacher, but before that, you know, I had all sorts of different jobs. I wasn't somebody who could just go to university and say, I'm going to be a teacher. This was something that I had to work through in order to finance myself going to university. And it was going into teaching was a real eye-opener for me, because as anybody who works in education, you do it because for the main reason that you want to make a bit of a difference. You want to encourage these kids. You see them as the future. You believe in them. You have that passion. And when I started teaching, it was pretty positive, and then austerity hit, and I saw the impact of that in very real terms on the children that I was teaching and their parents and carers too. And that had a huge impact on me, because myself growing up, one of the reasons I wanted to become a teacher was because I myself had grown up with mental health problems at home. I experienced periods of time where there was money. I experienced periods of time where there was no money. It was difficult. And I recognised with children who I was teaching a lot of the same kind of insecurities that were showing. And I firmly believe that so many, not all mental health problems, obviously, but the mental health crisis that we see in this country is fueled by financial insecurity. It is fueled by fear and worry that people have to go through day to day, and the pressures that are put on them in life. So that kind of drove me into the classroom, and that drove me to activism and trade unionism, because I didn't see that I could do something about it on my own. Community organising in my local area. We had an education minister at the time, Edward Timpson. He was a multimillionaire of shoe and cobbling fame of the Timpson shop, and he was terrible at his job. He ignored what local people were saying, and I decided, do you know what, it's an unwinnable seat, but I'm going to stand and I'm going to give this person a bit of a kick in, so that he can't ignore ordinary people in the community. He can't ignore the children who are being taught in this community and their families. And it was an amazing campaign. Those who can remember 2017 and the feeling along that time of the momentum that happened, people wanted to hear something new. The plan that Theresa May had of Jeremy, the fire just being put out, it wasn't. If there had been 2 more weeks of that campaign, I have no doubt that Jeremy would have been Prime Minister. It was, you could feel that excitement. And for me personally, in an unwinnable seat, I managed to win by 48 votes. Now, you asked, and I'm coming to it, what it was like then entering Parliament. I'd hardly ever been to London, let alone into Parliament. I'd never been to Parliament. The first time I entered that place was as the Member of Parliament for Crewe and Nantwich. To say that it was that I had imposter syndrome would be an understatement. But I remember so clearly I did my maiden speech, and my knees, I always liked public speaking. I like that side of it, but my knees, they were knocking together. It was absolutely terrifying. And I went home, and I remember my dad saying to me, how did you get on? How did you feel? My dad's from Scotland, a mining background, and he was so proud. Obviously, I was in Parliament. How did you feel it went? I said, "Oh, Dad, it didn't go well. I fluffed my first line. I was so nervous." And he just said to me, "Look, you do not waste a single second in there. You are representing women. You are representing your class. You deserve to be there. Nobody in there is smarter than you just because they've been to the fanciest universities, etc. You have more life experience in your little finger than most people on those benches will ever have." And I gave my head a little bit of a wobble, and I did as I usually do, and I listened to my father, and I went in and I took my place on those benches, and I never let it get to me again. I deserve to be there, and there should be more people like myself from ordinary backgrounds in Parliament making a difference. But if that happened, you'd actually see change. And the way our system is set up, that isn't really what the system wants.
Honestly, that was a very inspiring response. I do wish back in school, a few years ago, I had someone like you teaching me. Would have been an amazing time.
I would have loved to teach you too.
We'll save this for another call, hopefully. But on to my second question, Laura. So obviously, Corbynism was in many ways an insurgency against a Labour elite captured by big businesses and out of touch with ordinary people. So one of the questions will be, what did you learn in Parliament about the culture of a Labour right, the culture that has reasserted itself under Starmer, and how do the Mandelsons of the political world do politics?
Oh gosh, where do you start? So I remember so clearly my first parliamentary Labour Party meeting and walking into that room, and Jeremy got standing ovation, and I thought, oh wow, things like I'd been obviously hearing on the news, and we were all so cross in my family and my personal circles regarding the attempts to ruin Jeremy as leader. And so there was this standing ovation, and some people who had kind of been brief in the press, they stood up and they were talking about they got it wrong, etc., etc. And so I thought, oh wow, this is pretty good. Something's changing. And then we had pretty quickly we had the conference, and that felt quite uplifting as well. But something then started to change, and this you could see it. You could see these groups forming. I was somebody who had never been involved really in politics. I'd never been to Labour Party conference, because if you are from a poor background, etc., you don't usually get to join in with these kind of things too often. Not until the period of Corbynism that made it far more accessible. So I was a bit naive to how all of this stuff worked, but I was because people didn't know where I sat. I was invited to all these strange meetings. I was invited to a meeting to go and meet Tom Watson. Now I declined because, I don't know. That to me was just why. Why do Tom wants to come and talk to me? We could talk in. But there were all these secret little meetings that you were suddenly invited to, and people were testing where you were and all this nonsense. And I just avoided it. My thing was, I'm going to be authentic and transparent because that's all I can be. Now, I do have to say that in Parliament, not everybody who I came across who had different politics to me, I saw as an enemy at all. There were people who on a personal level were really kind to me at quite difficult moments, and I genuinely think that they were. I think it's too simplistic to say these people are bad and these people are good, because I think that the way this system operates and it moves, it poisons as many people as it possibly can. And the people who are poisoned, they might be the people who you think are on your side. So you have to go in and you have to have your wits about you. You learn very quickly. One of the things I learned very quickly was never put anything in a WhatsApp message that you don't want to be screenshot, because they will be shared and used against you. And it amazed me how many people did that kind of stuff. And it's a very strange environment. But I think with the Labour right, the thing is they were very organised. They weren't just the Labour right. They were working with Tories. They were working with other people. They were working with lobbyists. They were working with organisations outside of Parliament. The kind of the power diet. Wherever there is power, wherever there is influence, you're going to find this stuff. Do I think everybody who enters Parliament is an evil person with horns on their heads who are looking to do terrible things? No, I don't. I think a lot of people go in there with really good intentions. I have some wonderful friends who I'll have for life who are there. Do I think that the system operates to corrupt people, to make them feel trapped, to make them feel pressured, to make them feel that they have to be part of this Westminster bubble. 100%. It's a very clever it is a very clever, very old system that has done quite well at making people very, very wealthy in this country and excluding the vast majority from having democracy, whilst portraying the illusion that we actually have it.
Right. Honestly, I think, including myself and people on this call, I think it's very insightful to hear your experience of Parliament, because I think it tends to be the kind of dilemma where we only see Westminster on the news through a scandal, through big decisions, or different legislation changing. And we never hear from a first person perspective how interesting, exciting, or difficult it can be to navigate around Parliament. So now, before we go on to more questions by members, I just wanted to talk a bit more about the many and your party. We've heard a lot about the problems in our politics. So your party was founded to do politics differently from the kind of elite corruption and self-serving political class that we've discussed tonight. It emerged from parts of independent movements, such as areas like Bradford, where we've defeated Labour in their former heartlands, and we will be fighting in May to do it again. But obviously, since its foundation, your party's had a bumpy start. But we do have a real chance to get things back on track, because until Monday at 5 p.m, your party members are electing their collective leadership. We are running with Jeremy as part of a many campaign. So just to reiterate, our vision is simple: to end the navel gazing and transform your party into the mass campaigning force that it once promised to be. Whether that's on the cost of living or Palantir, or whether that's restoring our democracy. To elect Jeremy as our parliamentary leader, so we have a clear voice, one that can hold the Mandelsons and the Starmers of British politics to account, and one that will build real power in our communities, from the picket line to the ballot box. So if you're a Your Party member and you haven't voted yet, then go to themany.uk to find Jeremy's candidates in your area and the order that we're asking you to rank them in. You have until 5 p.m. on the 23rd of February. That's Monday. So don't delay. And if you're not a Your Party member just yet, then you can join today. So, moving on to the final section of tonight's call, we had various questions from various members, including a Mark and a Laura, on how we can confront the kind of corruption and state capture that the Mandleson affair has exposed. So for Jeremy, beyond individual campaigns on Palantir, what are the structural changes that we can push for in our politics, and how can we restore our democracy and make politics work for the people and not the powerful?
We've got to make ourselves available and open to the communities we're in, and understand what people are concerned about and what people want. Because it is communities where there is high levels of unemployment, and youth unemployment is now at 16% and looks like it's going to be rising still further. There is a lot of anger amongst a lot of young people. There's also huge issues of demand on the NHS, on education, and particularly on housing. So we've got to be part and parcel of all those campaigns in uniting communities in making those demands. Because Reform and the far right are there. They're organised, they're mobilised, and they're getting a write-up 24/7 on GB News, the Daily Mail, a lot of the phone-ins on LBC, etc., all day long and all the time, that somehow or other the big problem in Britain is not a disoriented and disjointed economic system that favours the very wealthiest and very, very most powerful people in our society, and instead seeks to blame migrants. They're actually, migrants are the ones who claim the least, work the most, and are fundamental to the running of our NHS and our care services. So I think we have to be open and involved with communities all the time. And so in your party, what we do is very important. Are we to be an inward-looking organisation that endlessly debates amongst itself? And are we to be inward-looking where we exclude everybody else? Or are we to be an organisation that is totally out there and open all the time? monthly at least meetings, forums with the local communities, monthly campaigns, and a system of communication with each other, which makes sure that if somebody's doing something really well on a housing campaign in Hull, let's hear about it. If somebody's doing really well and very effective on a social care campaign on Merseyside, let's hear about it. Let's hear that experience. And so that moves us forward then, working with local communities and groups, working with existing independent groups, and we will be putting up our own candidates in elections. Obviously, we're in a position not to do everything immediately, but we've got to get organized and going forward on it, making those fundamental demands all the time. That's how politics will change. Because I thought the points that Laura made were absolutely very observant and very interesting about the way in which MPs behave and get sucked into particular groups, and they see politics as a series of maneuvering. The media sees politics as a series of maneuvering, and whenever they're commenting on things, the media always decide what's important is what MPs think about something. They don't start from the principle that actually the problems of homelessness should be looked at through the eyes of the people that are homeless, and so on. So we can give voice to people and we can do things differently. That will mean we'll become an insurgent force in politics, which is something I was trying to make the Labour Party into through community organising. And I never really expected this. But the biggest opposition I got was actually from the Labour Party officialdom against community organising and the whole principle of the party being a community-based party. They did not want that. The lobbyists did not want that. The lobbyists wanted something they could manipulate. Well, we're not up for sale. We're not open to manipulation. There's no billionaires supporting us. There's no right-wing media supporting us. It's up to us to make our own arguments. The other thing I just gently say, and this is perhaps slightly off the mark, is but sometimes social media can be a nasty, racist, misogynist place, which causes a lot of harm to people, and a lot of brutality comes out of stuff that's done on social media. Let's not indulge in that. Let's not involve ourselves in that. My view is you achieve much more in politics and much more to persuade people by being relentlessly positive in your communications and not just asserting negatives all the time. Negatives don't win people over. Positives do. Positives bring us strength.
I think massive emphasis on that last point. We must be kind and we must be caring for others whilst we engage in politics. And I think the best quote I've heard from Jeremy before is, we don't have to agree on everything, we just have to get along. So I'll be moving forward to the next question. So we've spoken tonight a lot about networks of patrons and power and the need to make politics accountable to people. So on that note, we've had a question from Rukaya on how will you ensure candidate selection processes don't replicate the same informal networks that we've criticised in Westminster, i.e. the old boys networks. This is all the more relevant given the revelations in the newspaper that recently Mandleson was personally involved in purging left-wing candidates under Starmer's leadership of Labour. So I think I'm going to take this question myself, if that's okay with you guys.
Please.
And I do think it's great that your party is committed to open selections, which includes mandatory reselections. That means that we can prevent the Labour MPs with jobs for life, because this breeds a disconnection from constituents, from ordinary working class people, meaning that incumbency guarantees them the job for life. I think personally in Bradford, we've made it our objective to challenge incumbents, because when politicians become comfortable in power, they don't tend to listen to the constituents or the communities' needs anymore. But we need to do much more than that. We need to be deeply rooted in our communities. And Jeremy has already talked about it, but we need to be working with community independence. That includes Bradford, that includes Southport, that includes Newham, and the list goes on. Jeremy's proposal for monthly outward-facing assemblies, as well as branches, is a perfect idea, because I can name a lot of people, hundreds of people, that that want to engage with their local representatives on issues that matter to them. And that's where we should be looking. I also do think the socialist leadership program that we propose means that we get to build up leaders from workplace struggles and community struggles. We get to build people like Laura, like Jeremy, because they know what people want to see. They've lived the experiences that people have lived. We do not need politicians that are bought by money, that are parachuted into constituencies and taking seats. We need people from working class communities, from all walks of life, to determine what is the best decision for people in the community. And of course, we need to make sure that we get these candidates elected, because that means, as Jeremy says, we can speak to voters about the issues that matter to them, whether it's the NHS, whether it's the cost of living, whether that's protecting our democratic freedoms, or whether that's the genocide in Gaza, not just our ideological obsessions. So finally, for Laura, we've had a couple of questions from members, which I think we might need to touch on. I think Vanessa asked, the powers in the world seem to be so corrupt. What can we do locally to make a change?
Oh gosh. So I think the first thing that we have to recognize is, look, where there's power, there is always an incentive to protect it. That is from small organizations all the way up. It's almost intrinsic to human nature. So we have to be aware of that and understand our own weaknesses to it, right? We can all claim to be purer than pure, but you have to be aware that these things don't just present themselves as obvious grabs for power. They're subtle, so you have to be wise to it. Where there's money, there is always an incentive to buy access. So again, at a local level, if it, you just have to be looking, follow the money. I was always taught that, follow the money, because that will often tell you quite a lot. And look, where there is personal gain to be made, we have to recognize that there's always an incentive to be silent. And sometimes people will choose the silent option because it is the easiest option. It's difficult to stand up sometimes and put your head above, which is why, as a trade unionist, we talk so much about building the collective in your workplace. You shouldn't be building something alone. You need to be having those conversations and building that group response. That's how you do things locally. You talk to people, you get people on side, you understand where they are. You don't tell them where they should be. You meet them where they are and you learn along the way. And my big thing is, if we can get people to understand and to really look at where the money goes in this country, where their hard-earned money goes in this country, and you stop, we add a different narrative, obviously, to the one that Reform have been organising and promoting and building for a number of years, and we push back, and let's just say that is supported by our media, our mainstream media, so it's been easy for them to get that message out. We have to be getting our message out. We do that through community organising. If anybody is in your party thinking there is a quick fix to this, then I have to say, please, you have to be realistic. This is going to take work. We have to be present in our communities. We have to be having conversations. We have to show that there is a different way and there is a different message. And you will come up against resistance to that. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. The more positive things that you're out doing and the work that we can do alongside trade unions, the better. And we just have to remember, look, powerful people, they have access to stuff. They have access to lawyers. They have access to PR teams. They have all of this kind of, and it really is a network of power. But it's quite a small amount compared to the masses and masses of ordinary people who try their best every day in a system that works against them. What we have to do is we have to go and build in that group. There are more good people than there are bad. I firmly believe that. So, this is why it's so important that we don't all just talk to ourselves and we get out there and we start having having those conversations, because to be honest with you, we are behind massively. We should have been doing this way back when. So yeah, time is against us, but we must get started.
Yep, I think perfectly on the topic. We need to tackle political apathy. You said it yourself. We need to be door knocking. We need to be talking to people, because that is one of the ways we can win against these corrupt people. Now, I don't know who wants to take this next question from Bill. The question is, given the insidious level of inculcation of the neoliberal socio-economic model, how can we undo the damage caused by 47 years of individualism? And how can your party contribute towards this fight?
Do you want to go first, Jeremy?
We'll both take this one. It's a great question, and thanks very much for it, because you're right. The 1970s was the beginning of the neoliberal model. It was the Chicago Boys, what they did in Chile. It was Reagan and Proposition 13 in California. It was Thatcher in Britain. And it was also the Labour government at the end of the 1970s that started conceding ground through the IMF loan, and then the prices and incomes policy, and then the austerity that it introduced. And that paved the way for Thatcher, because remember, the Labour government came in on the back of a massive strike of public sector workers who wanted a decent level of pay. I was part of that strike operation. Indeed, I was an organizer of that strike. And so we have had all that. The Labour Party at various times moved into a much better economic direction, and we certainly tried to turn ourselves away from austerity when I became leader in 2015. In fact, that was the whole basis of my leadership campaign, was ending austerity. It's now back big time. Neoliberal economics is back big time, and the beggar thy neighbor policy of making life easier for each multinational in one country after another means they pay less and less tax. There's more and more free zones, etc. Surely what we need is a number of things. One is to refuse to accept the idea that austerity creates jobs, creates prosperity, and anything else. It doesn't. It creates more and more inequality, poverty, and injustice. And secondly, that we've got to work with unions, working class organizations internationally to challenge these very big corporations, because they do operate globally, they do transfer pricing, they do avoid taxation on a global level. That is part of this whole idea that the only way you get economic growth is by that. And the second thing is about empowering communities and what they do at a local level. We hold monthly forums in my constituency. I promised that when I was elected as the independent MP in July 24. We've had a lot of them, and they've been fascinating. We held one on workers' rights. The speakers were two Deliveroo riders, Uber Eats Deliveroo riders, who just talked about their lives, their lack of understanding what their income was going to be from one month to another, and the dangers and horrors of their job. They are the new super exploited class, young people working on insecure work in dangerous conditions. We've got to be with them in helping them to form unions, supporting unions, working with them. We've got to be there to mobilize those people. And so it does mean being open. And sometimes the conversations can be quite difficult. People say, well, actually, are you doing enough? Shouldn't you be doing a bit more? And so we've got to open ourselves up to that pressure. Otherwise, we become complacent, arrogant, and out of touch. And so it is making our party deliberately in that position where we are there working with the community and bringing about change. It's also about political education. Now, political education sounds like an awful term. Hello, we're going to bring everyone together and indoctrinate them. We're going to indoctrinate you this afternoon into the fundamentals of this, that, and the other. No. Political education is about understanding struggles that have gone on, understanding the great strikes of the past, the miners' strike, Grunwick, and so many more, but also looking at the achievements that have been made by so many communities, the way in which in Glasgow Mary Barber led the rent strike during the First World War, which brought about rent controls, which brought about an improvement to the living standards of a lot of working class people in Glasgow, albeit using the time of the war to put the maximum pressure on the government. Brilliant. And we can learn so much from simple bits of history and make it popular and important. And so how we deal with that and how we deal with history and understanding are also part of it. Come on. We need to live in a sustainable world where we don't destroy it by environmental and by destroying the biodiversity of the planet. We need to live in a world at peace where we don't destroy it by endless wars. We need to look for spending resources on people needs rather than the power of destruction. And I'll finish on this because I go on too long. I know my problem. Laura explained it very well. The power of lobby in Parliament is incredible. The lobbying power of big business, of corporations, of the arms industry. Sometimes MPs don't even realize they're being lobbied, where sometimes they're playing under false flags. You don't realize what's going on. We've got to stand up to all of that. The late, great Joan Maynard, working class woman, farm worker, became MP for Sheffield Brightside. First time in Parliament, she sits down with me, a cup of tea, pours the tea out and says, Jeremy, I'm going to give you one piece of advice and one only, then you can go on your business. I said, what's that then, Joan? I knew her already. She's a lovely woman. She said, as she pours the tea out, she said, if both front benches are agreed on something, the working class are losing out.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Can I come in? Is that okay?
Yep. Go for it, Laura.
And I mean, just on that point, one of the bits of advice that I was given quite quickly was from Dennis Skinner. Now, my grandfather was a miner. Dennis was a huge figure, kind of growing up in my household. So I made a beeline for him, and he was wonderful to me, always so full of advice and great stories. And one thing he said to me, of many things, was, I'm not going to even try and do his accent. Don't go on any of the trips that they try and arrange. It is designed to try and buy you. He said, I have never been on any trip that has been organised by Parliament. He wasn't a member of any APPG group in Parliament. And he said that if I was smart, then I would avoid them because they are the place that all this lobbying takes place. And he was absolutely right. And I was only there for a very short time, but I never did those things. And not to take away from people who do, but I was just always acutely aware of it's that suspicious thing in a working class mind. Why are you doing that? Why are you talking to me? What is it you want from me? It's because there's always something, believe me. With the question that we were asked, I've got a perfect example really today. I took my kids and my dogs to a wonderful pet cafe in Nantwich, and it's lovely. This is probably the most middle class sentence that I'm ever going to say, and I'm proud of it. But it was a lovely little cafe, and we all went. And there's a new Starbucks that's opened in town, right? And my daughter, I'm up at the till, and she came over to me and she said, Mummy, is there any chance that we can go and have a look at the new Starbucks? And so this is the political education that is very subtle. I turned to her and I said, I'm not spending any of my money in Starbucks because Starbucks avoid paying tax in this country. They don't do anything for the environment. So you will not get Mummy spending a single penny in Starbucks. And the woman behind the till, and I have no idea what her politics is, and there were about 4 or 5 people in that room, and they will have probably been from all types of different political backgrounds. They all said, your mum is absolutely right. So from that moment, my daughter witnessed something that I'm not saying she's not going to go to Starbucks at some point in her life, but she saw that in this community, there was this joined up approach of this big corporation that had come to the town was probably taking away from something wonderful in our local community. It's those kind of conversations that can lead to things, and they are small. And if you do them every day, you never kind of know the impact. I would potentially look at. So look, if we look at the huge problems of neoliberalism and all of the things that is ingrained in our society, then we would do nothing, because we would be absolutely frozen by the weight of trying to tackle this. Build collectively in your workplace, how you can build collectively within your group of friends, how you can campaign and just chip away at. Be silent, never be silent, because it's, I don't even, my gran used to always say to me, you're a long time dead, so make the most of the time you've got and say what you need to, and that is something that I still go by.
Yep. Right. But honestly, I think, Laura, you're completely correct. Conversations and conversations, that's what we need to be doing if we want to undo the damage done both to people, to us. And that leads me to my final kind of theme or conversation. So coming back to tonight's themes, the Mandleson affair has exposed the rotten core of Starmer's Labour. But the risk is it's the far right that benefit. It's reform that benefits. So how do we make sure it's the left that provides the explanation, and it's going to be the left that provides the answers?
Do you want to go first, Laura, or me?
You go, Jeremy. Go
on. Good question again, and thank you very much. First of all, you oppose racism in any form whatsoever in our society. Any form of racism has to be opposed. It divides communities, divides the working class, causes unbelievable horror, tension, and stress amongst people who are victims of racism and racist attacks. And so we've got to be there the whole time. And secondly, the appeal of the far right and racists is made in the absence of an alternative. The Nazis in Germany in the 1920s, like the Nazis in France, the Nazis in Britain, and so on in the 20s and 30s, went to communities and said high unemployment, poverty is all caused, in that case, they said, by Jews, by gays, by migrants, and so on. There's always somebody to blame. There's always a convenient minority to blame. And we all know where that leads to. What Farage and the far right are doing now is not really any different. Not really any different at all. If you listen to the speeches Reform make, they offer no alternative, they offer no solution, they offer no hope to anybody, but they're very good on blaming. So they say, there's a problem in your hospital, there's a big queue at the A&E department, there's older people stuck in beds because of lack of social care. They'll find any issue, and somehow or other, this will all be blamed on refugees and on migrants. They will never say that without migrant workers, the NHS would not exist. They would never say that. They will never admit that. The same applies in education, transport, and so much else. And so you have to unite communities on the social demands, the economic demands, the political demands that we're making on housing, on issues of rent control, on issues of council house building, on issues of the way in which leaseholders are ripped off systematically. You have to unite people on all those issues together. And so the best antidote to the far right and racists is the unity of the rest of us, the unity of communities altogether. Put it another way, if all of us on this call were working in one organization and the employer was treating us disgracefully and we ended up taking strike action, either to get better conditions or to get better pay or a bit of both, we wouldn't say only those of one community are going to take strike action, the rest are going to stay at work. Obviously not. We would all take action together because we would only know that our unity was the only way of winning the demands and winning an improvement. The same applies at a community level. And so we have got to be there as your party on all the anti-racist demonstrations. And I'll be in Manchester this weekend on those anti-racist demonstrations, as I am on many more of them. And we're also there on the housing campaigns, the housing marches, and all the other things that take place. And obviously on the international solidarity campaigns, Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Yemen, etc., all of them. And so we're there. At the same time, action educates people. And that's what we've got to do. Be open, be democratic, be inclusive, but above all, be demanding of something better. I don't want our kids growing up in debt in a deeply divided society. I want our kids growing up with a sense of hope for the future, where they're freed of debt and able to lead their own lives and be creative and exciting. So never forget, your party must also include music, must also include poetry, must also include theatre, must also include film. Use it all. There's a whole world out there. Let's enjoy it.
Oh, I totally agree with what Jeremy said. And I think what this whole kind of Epstein, Mandelson, all of these revelations, what they expose really is just how these elite networks actually operate. And they operate without oversight. They blur the boundaries between public duty and private power. They totally avoid accountability. At the heart of this, and let's not forget, there are people who have been so exploited, so badly treated, and this is so huge, this is so massive, and you can see the whole machine trying to put the fires out, because so many people will be involved in this scandal. And the thing with this is, when politics works like this, trust completely collapses. And who can blame people, right, for just thinking, what an awful, rotten world. The people who have power and money and are in charge, look at what they're doing. There's one set of rules that apply to them and another set that apply to us. I mean, where are the arrests that should be happening? It is exactly the same kind of thing as what happened with the banking crisis. Where is the accountability? And people hear that and they see that and they think, I don't stand a chance. So they do like one or two things, I think. They switch off because life is hard and they want to try and get, as understandably, as much enjoyment out of everyday life with their family and friends as they possibly can. So it is very much kind of, I can't do anything about it, so I'm shutting off from it. Or they listen to the loudest voices because they're so angry, so annoyed, they need somewhere to direct that. And there has been immense organising going on for such a long time to get that pressure building against disabled people, against immigrants, against women, against poor people for so long. And we just have to have the alternative joined up vision, and every single ounce of energy that we waste fighting with each other, we are wasting time talking to those people who desperately need an alternative. And I cannot stress that enough. And that is why it is so important that we do get this party back on track, that we see the many going forward as a party that is speaking directly to communities and bringing people on board. And if we don't do that, and if we don't do that soon, then what an absolute waste of a marvelous opportunity.
Thank you, Laura. And I think, similar to the last question, the answer is that we must be talking to people. We must persuade people that there is an alternative. There must be hope for the normal working class person, and it can't just be us three alone. It's going to have to be everyone watching this call, every member in your party, because the only way we're ever going to see change is when we are that change. And so that will conclude tonight's call. Thank you so much to everyone that joined, and so much to our speakers as well. Now, if you're your party member, please do make sure that you voted for not just for Jeremy, but his team at the Many in the Your Party elections. If you go to themany.uk for more information, you'll be able to find your local candidates through the postcode checker. So I'm your host, Ismailuddin. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you all on the streets.
Thanks, Ismail. Lovely to see you, Jeremy.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Ismail. Thanks, Laura. Absolutely fantastic. On, campaign, talk, listen. Remember, everybody you meet, whoever they are, knows something you don't know. So you can learn from everybody. Remember that. Thanks
if
a lot.
someone
Everyone.
told you the future of your party was in the balance and you had the casting vote, which way would you go?
Would you vote for a broad, inclusive party that could really change things?
Or a narrow fringe party that shouts angrily from the sidelines?
Well, you do have that vote, and that is the choice in the Your Party elections.
Because we're choosing our leadership.
And if you want a party that can challenge for power, a party with mass appeal, and a party that makes the establishment feel scared of us again,
then you need to elect Jeremy Corbyn and the candidates standing alongside him with the Many campaign.
because if Jeremy's backed on the CC by members from the many who share his vision, then we can finally leave all the infighting and drama behind and get on with what we should be doing, campaigning tirelessly on the issues that matter the most to the people in our communities.
Like sky-high rents, soaring bills, rip-off, privatisation, and the danger of rising racism led by reform and the far right in our society.
We can repair our cross-community coalition, and that is the pride and strength of your party in the face of the rising far right.
And we can make the most of our best asset by making Jeremy our parliamentary leader, giving us a clear identity and a recognisable voice, trusted and respected by millions for his principles, consistency and honesty.
Wouldn't you use your casting vote for that?
Rather than more infighting and more attacks on allies, more purity tests and more sectarianism.
It's time to stop talking to ourselves. It's time to start talking to the people.
That way we unite people. That way we defeat reform. That way we bring about real change in our society.
Vote for Jeremy and candidates standing with him in the Many, and together
Let's get our party back on track.